It's History After Dark. Are you all excited? We're excited. We're up on the YouTubes now as well, so both sides are running. I've just had the notification from myself on Instagram that I've started a live, so that's good times. So I am just waiting for Kat and Philippa, obviously, to come up on the Instagram with me. We are all here on YouTube already, which is, of course, super fabulous. And I think, there you go, there's Philippa's. Kat, where are you? Where are you? Oh no, I've got Philippa's. There's Philippa. Kat,
Hi.
Kat, what are you doing with your life? Why are you not here? Right, I'm going to do it the other way around. I'm going to invite you instead because your invitation is not coming up. Let's see if that's going to work. So I hope everyone is okay. There she is. So now we have all three of us on both. Yay!
The issue was that this thing that allows me to charge my phone and use the microphone doesn't allow the headphone thing to actually work. So that's about as much use. The chocolate teapot. I nearly swore there before the disclaimer.
Stated use is not.
So it's
not living up to it.
Lie from the devil. So I'm going to throw that out the window with extreme gusto. So if at some point my phone turns off, it's because I've not got enough battery. So
I think you'll be okay.
We better just.
Okay. Without further ado, I will do the introduction to the session in just a moment. But, Kat, the disclaimer.
Hello, friends. It's 8:15 of a Wednesday, PM, GMT, BST, whatever you fancy. And that means it's History After Dark here on both the Instagram and the YouTube. We called it that because when we made it up, it was winter. And at this time of night, it is still dark. It won't be in summer, but the name still fits. For while we do like to share historical factettes, we also do like to look at the darker side of history. We like to get smutty, use 4-letter expletives, generally get a bit vulgar and plumb the depths of our respective psyches. So with that being said, if you're in an open plan office with a judgmental boss, put a headphone in, unless you're a disciplinary. We will get you a disciplinary. That is a fact.
Promise.
We vow that if you want a disciplinary, just listen to us at full volume. If you're in a car or a kitchen or wherever you might be with a small dobber of a child, we call this dobber Timmy. Timmy's a problem. Timmy is the sort of child that hears one thing once and then repeats it ad nauseum. Timmy is the child that goes into the teacher and asks whatever depraved thing we've said what it means, and then you're going to get called up to school by somebody who looks like Miss Honey from Matilda, who's like, could you explain why Timmy knows what blah 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 is? And everyone, that's awkward for all people. So put a headphone in. Alternatively, you can watch on the playback, either on the Instagram or the YouTube. I say that it's always best to watch us live because on one occasion in our history, we have said something in a live stream that was so unspeakably depraved that it was borderline illegal. And we had to yeet that content into the sun. So that may happen again. It's only happened once, which either means we've got better or it's due to come around again. Today
we don't know which.
We're going to roll the dice and see where we land. So that is the. Oh, also don't Google it if you don't know what it means. Don't Google it. And this is not a drinking game. None of this is a drinking game, friends. If you like your liver, don't do shots. Thank you.
Beth has put to your room, Timmy, whereas Katie Bridgewater has gone with Timmy. Fuck off to the other room.
Good. Yes. Put it on a t-shirt.
The more direct
approach. Awesome.
No, it can't be retrieved from the sun.
No. In fact, have we even got it?
Nope.
Yes.
No.
Actually, we have.
Oh, no, yeah, we have. But no.
Nope.
No.
It went onto the podcast heavily edited.
From about 90 minutes down to about 5.
It was like a government report. It was all just removed, basically.
Redacted.
Yes. Hello, goodbye.
It's me though, just because it's not a drinking game for you doesn't mean it's not for me. Well, on your own
that message. We do not approve. We do not recommend it. We will never recommend it.
Dorothy's I'm doing a drinking game with coffee.
Fair enough.
And people still want to see the YouTube episode. Well, you're going to be disappointed then, aren't you?
Well, no doubt we'll say something disgusting at some point. So you'll hear equally vile stuff. Don't worry.
Don't worry, it'll be fine.
Don't fret, Petal.
Okay, so today we are continuing the Deceased Gits series. We are on G G. Now, originally, this was someone different. We all sat there and looked at each other and went, well, that was a fucking idea.
Yeah, well, why did we choose them?
Let's do an easier one.
Let's do something a bit less ridiculous. So we're having a George off now. The Georgians, bless them. I mean, if you want to know about dysfunctional families, look up the Georgians. It was amazing. So the Hanoverians, basically, there were 4 Georges. So what we've done is we've taken 1 George each. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, that doesn't add up because there were 4 of them and 3 of you. This is true. Well observed.
Correct. Good spot. Yeah. Well done.
But what we've done is we have, and he'll come up in conversation, of course, is we have not none of us.
Not even one.
Great.
Not
Great
one of us.
English.
We have not one of us. Not even one. That's fucking Shakespearean, Catherine.
Thank you very much. I'm trying.
How very now.
And none of us have picked George III, because as you know, if you've joined in for the last the roundup of the first 4, we have a song that Kat sings, which talks about culpability. And as George III was for a very large part of his reign exceptionally mentally unwell, we thought that was a tad on the unfair side. So he will come up in the conversation. So what we've done is we've taken George I, George II, and George IV, and we're going to sort of debate them. I think the idea with this one is to kind of maybe establish at the end of this episode who we think is probably the biggest git of the 3.
Yeah, who's git in chief?
Yeah,
so
I think
can be culpability. Can ask it about them?
I think I already have my git of choice, but we will throw the other 3 at you and see where you are at the end of it. Now we had a meeting on Monday. We had one of our famous HAD meetings.
Yes.
And we are introducing a number of new things. We've got lots of stuff in the pipeline, but some of it is a bit more imminent. And we are starting 2 new sections in each show. One of them is starting this week, and then as of next week, you'll get both. And they will be splitting. Generally speaking, we've been doing like 1 section each on this, haven't we? So we've done separate areas of research, whatever, to present to you each. So today we're only going to be having the first one, because for the next one, we want to be asking you guys to do something as well. So we need to start that next week. But the first one is Word of the Week. Now, we've talked about this before, particularly when we've had incidences where something horrendous has arisen from the pits of our conversations. And people said, what does that mean? We didn't know what that was. Should we Google it? Hell no.
No.
So what we've done is we are taking it in turns to pick a word, and then we will tell you all about its history, its etymology, where it might be used, etc., etc. You'll all be delighted to hear that Kat's going first. So brace yourselves would be my advice.
But that's for later.
That's for later.
That's for later.
So, yes. So our first George, Gitty George number 1, George I, is going to be covered by Philippa. Philippa, hit us up with your George.
Right. So I picked George. I'm gonna give you a little bit of. I picked George.
We've all picked a George.
We've all picked a George.
We've all done that.
This is correct. And it's only it's interesting, isn't it? Because we can look back and call it the Georgian era, because we know we went George, and we know that actually we could have had a Frederick in there, but he unfortunately died before his brother, so it was another George. But we could have begun the Hanoverian dynasty with a Sophia, because it was in fact Georg, as his name actually was. We anglicised it because you couldn't have we were going to have a German on the throne. You couldn't have a German name, so we made him George. But it was actually his mother, Sophia, who was the next in line to the throne, or chosen next in line to the throne, which I'll come back to in a moment. But she predeceased Queen Anne, who the Hanoverians took over from by like 2 months,
a month
or something. A month. It was really short. And she'd been in incredible health up till that point as well. She was in her early 80s. But she died on the 8th of June, I think, and Queen Anne died on the 1st of August. So really, so a couple of months. So we could have had actually a Sophia to begin with. But anyway, we went straight on to the Georges. Now, that's famously banded around that there were 50 claimants to what was now the British throne after the unification of Scotland and England in formally in 1707. Anyway, yeah, 1707. So we're talking about the British throne now, and the famously 50 other candidates that could have had the throne, but they were of the wrong religion, because by now we'd outlawed Catholics coming to the throne. That's very long and complicated, but basically nobody wanted to cede power back to Rome, back to a foreign power, i.e. the Pope, for anything. So Catholics, no good. We didn't want them on the throne. Just as a little aside, because I suppose I could have done more digging, but who the 50 are, I would have to have done a lot more digging to find out who these 50 are. Because actually Sophia was granddaughter of James VI of Scotland, first of England. So where these 50, so she's, in other words, she was a fairly close relative. So this 50 may well have been sort of something banded around by the Jacobite sympathisers.
Well, they were reckless breeders, so that sort of a thing.
Well, yeah. So I'm not sure if that's supposed to be illegitimate. Well, that's not really correct to include them in the 50. So I don't know if this was like a Jacobite sympathiser kind of trope to sort of try and illustrate an idea that the Hanoverians were so far removed from the British monarchy that we were sort of talking, really, really distant relatives, when in fact we weren't really. So you've got these apparent 50. Now, what you did actually have was Anne's half-brother still alive and kicking over on the continent. So you actually had a legitimate son of James II still alive and well. But of course, we'd barred Catholics, and that was his issue. But this is where you get the Jacobite rebellion, which plagued the Georges for the next few decades at least. And that had caused a real split in Parliament, because you had people on the sort of more conservative side, generally from the Tory party, who wanted to go with hereditary claim. They wanted to continue with hereditary claim above all else. And then you had the Whig party, who were far more in favour of going with this kind of chosen monarch. So there's already these splits. But George he's already a king, or he's already pretty much in Hanover. I'm not quite sure. I don't think they were called king. I think he was
elector.
Yeah. So, but effectively, he's in charge, and it's actually more of a pure monarchy over there. He's in charge of everything. Whereas by this time in Britain, you've started to have a parliamentarian system, which has far more control and over them. So the monarch doesn't have that absolute control like he does over in Hanover. But he's got a son already. He's got a son and a daughter, the legitimate ones, and he's got some more kids that are illegitimate as well. But before he comes over, and this is the bit that there's a few things that make him a bit of a git, I think. One, he knows he's in line to the British throne, albeit behind his mother's claim, but his mother is getting older and older. He doesn't appear to prioritize learning the language before he becomes king in 1714. So when he comes over, his English is very functional. He speaks many different languages, by the way. So it's not like he hasn't got a talent for languages, but he doesn't really put any emphasis into learning English. And I think what he does end up learning is by pure fact of being here and being around people speaking it, and so you're gonna pick it up. But I find that bizarre that there was no impetus to learn the language that he was going to require to be able to have any real control or understanding of what was happening. So that I thought was a bit bizarre. But the real gittish thing is the way he treated his wife. So he was actually married to his first cousin, another Sophia, because
there's a theme. There's going to be a theme, guys. There's a theme in here. Just buckle up.
Watch out for it.
Sophia Dorothea, because
I love that name. That's
why
amazing.
Not? Let's make it rhyme. So yes, she was his first cousin, because who wants to let the money leave the family? Who wants to that cat's letting her hair down?
My hair hurt. My hair was hurting. Sorry, it was pulling on my scalp.
That's right. I'm actually thinking that you made me think, when I put my hair up in a ponytail, I do get a headache. I think
how gorgeous and swishy it is.
Yeah, just leave it down. Yeah, so George has married his first cousin in order to keep. Well, what they want to do is start formal movement towards and I don't know how you say this. Cell, CELLE, territories as one country, but also they don't want the inheritance leaving the family too far. So there's this. They have a son, George, and because why not? And they have a daughter, Sophia. So you have a son and a daughter.
Yeah.
It's like the Tudors all over again, isn't it?
And the Stuarts.
And the Stuarts, yeah.
Every brother's called James or Charles.
Yeah. So you literally have George and Sophia. But the couple become estranged. I mean, sadly, love was not found in this first cousin match.
Who knew?
They both take lovers. The difference being that the concern is that Sophia will elope with her Swedish count that she is in love with, and that would be a scandal. It would be embarrassing, and you can't embarrass the royal family. So it takes a massively horrible turn, and the count is killed, murdered. It's all very shady. But something happens to him, and don't even know where his body is. There's a couple of theories that he was thrown into the river, or he was buried under the palace floor. I think probably the river would be more likely than digging up the floor and sticking him under there, but you never know. And that wasn't the end of it. So the marriage of George and Sophia is dissolved on the basis that she abandoned him. So she abandoned poor George.
He was a count as well, wasn't he?
He was a When I was typing that, when I was typing that, it did come out more accurately. So he has the marriage dissolved. She is put under house arrest, and where she remains for the remaining 30 years of her life. She is barred from remarrying. She pretty much has no time that is unsupervised for the rest of her life. She's allowed to walk around the little courtyard where she is unaccompanied. That's it. And most heartbreakingly of all, she never is allowed to see her children ever again. So when George comes over to England, he brings his mistress, his long-term mistress, really ugly woman.
Oh, I remember.
I'm sorry, but she is. Oh my God. Charlotte von Kalmansegg, who was made the Countess of Darlington, because
that makes it all right.
Because that makes sense. She gave him 3 children, so she basically acted like wife in all but legal sort of position. Now it's always, again, another thing that's banded around is he had 2 mistresses. Charlotte and the other lady whose name escaped, Melusine. Sorry, it's Melusine. Sorry, excuse me. It's Melusine von der Schulenburg, who was his mistress, excuse me. And it's Sophia Charlotte von Kalmansegg, who is the other one who was assumed to be a mistress. She's actually his half sister. But no, and they're not.
Things had happened with the Hanoverians. I mean,
but they're not actually sleeping together. They're not. She's not his mistress. It's just assumed to be, because nobody understands that somehow that he's her sister. I don't know.
Raven's written "Sweet Home Alabama." Oh dear.
So I think they were rivals, but in terms of influence of the king, as opposed to literally rivals for him.
For his Willy Winky.
Silver Hoshi going full Egyptian.
The bar is in hell.
So better than full sister. No, let me tell you.
Possibly.
He wasn't sleeping with his sister.
Jesus.
Christ almighty.
He can't help us. We're beyond him, mate. We're beyond him.
So that is another. That's a bit of a misnomer that
he was
he's
for doinking
sleeping.
his sister.
That he has two mistresses at the same time. It wasn't. It was. Well, he probably did have more than two mistresses at one time. But the two women that he was seeing around the most, one was his mistress, one was his like official mistress as well, and one was his half sister. So, so there's that. Now, when George was crowned, his coronation. They've got these factions because, of course, you've got the Jacobites, the people who believe that no, the hereditary claim of James over there in Rome should have trumped any other claim, and so you had literally a bone of contention. I've just read that. You have so you have these rival factions throughout the country, of course, and so on Coronation Day, which is the 20th of October, 1714, there's mass riots. Coronation riots even has its own name.
Great start.
Which is a fabulous start. And so you start to see these factions, which eventually, because we're all having to cut long stories short tonight to fit all the Georges in, gave rise to a rival faction with his son George eventually, and his own house, and that really took shape after the birth of George's son Frederick, and at the christening there was a bit of a hoo-ha, and George was banished, and he went off to his house at Leicester, his London residence at Leicester House. So they actually physically had another place basically for opposition, sort of politicians and whatever to start to gather. So this starts to take hold, which I'm sure we will get onto later. That disastrous father-son relationship kind of seems to just then now will set the scene for all of them with their first sons, for generation after generation. So yeah, there's a few other things about George, but I think I'm going to leave it there. One of the other things, should I say, is that it's said that he spends a lot of time over in Hanover. Actually, I could find 6 instances, and he was king from 1714 to 1727. So I think 6 times going back over to Hanover, if I've got that right, is not. So bearing in mind he is, still ruler of Hanover as well, doesn't seem to me particularly
unreasonable.
Unreasonable. Yeah, exactly. Now he does die over there, which maybe lends sort of the idea that he was always there, but he actually suffered with a stroke on his final visit there, and it was a fatal stroke. He died quite soon after, so he was buried there. And actually, I haven't written down where he was buried, but it was bombed by the British. I shouldn't laugh; it's not funny. But his remains had already been moved by that point. But yeah, it just seems like a really macabre kind of circle of events that he dies over there. He's our most recent, because obviously we do have kings that are buried abroad, but he's our most recent king to have been buried abroad. So his remains were moved before the bombing, but where he was originally laid to rest was bombed by the British during World War II, I believe. So
okay,
I will.
That is full circling.
It is
a bit odd, isn't it? So
yeah,
right. So that is George the First, today's first candidate for giddiness,
and he's a twat.
I mean, the way he dealt with it, the treatment of his wife, I think, really
is he's going to score when we do the roundup. He's going to score high for shit on personal life, isn't he? Let's be honest. There's nothing much more you can say to that. So I am down for George II. So to break things up a little bit, Kat introduces our first ever word of the week segment.
Do you have a jingle for this one, Kat?
History After Dark. History and History After Dark. Ready for it.
Let's look at the words of the week. Let's see what they mean. Will they be naughty or will they be not? Probably naughty. We are filth. So
You're amazing at this.
I'm not going to give you etymology because I'm going to show you a book of words. And it's not a manual because you can see it's a C. And it's also it's cant, not the other word. Get your mind out of the fucking gutter.
Even though it does sound like that when you say it.
Cant. You can't. This is cant.
I don't like the C word.
Yeah, right.
It's a gentleman's guide. Catherine, it's fine. It's a gentleman's guide, right?
Oh, well, that makes us right then.
So there you go. Gentleman's Guide, the language of rogues in Georgian London. So this was published essentially as a kind of dictionary. People say that cant is like Cockney rhyming slang. It's not. It's supposedly alternative terms and phrases that are used by a criminal class. It's always a criminal class, isn't there? So you can hear it if you're a gentleman gadding about, frequenting Harris's ladies in Covent Garden, for example. You can know if somebody's going to pick your pocket or slit your throat or some other thing. And so there's a whole variety of terminology. And the one that I have picked for you, and actually my word of the day, word of the week, I'm going to ask you to figure out if you can know what it refers to. So my term, it's not a word, it's a term, is Bartholomew baby or Bartholomew dull.
Is it something to do with water?
No.
Is it to do with the hospital?
Nope.
St. Bartholomew?
Bartholomew baby and Bartholomew. What was the other one?
Doll, like a dolly.
Oh, doll. It's a doll.
Yeah. I did.
Okay, so one is real and one isn't real. So is it something to do?
Oh, it wasn't baby snatching, was it?
No, babies and dolls are quite similar in this time because you might call a doll might also be called a baby.
Is it a child from a particular place?
No. Let me know.
Yeah, I'm giving up
because time marks.
Yeah.
I'm going to give
some cracking comments going on in this comment section.
The etymology of it relates to the Bartholomew Fair. So the Bartholomew comes from that, and the dolls and babies that would be sold on stalls at the Bartholomew Fair are really flashy. So kind of really well costumed and clothed dollies that are in, like, frankly, I suppose the phrase we might use now is that they're done up like a dog's dinner. It's perhaps another English Britishism. I'm not sure if that translates, but it's essentially it's somebody who's gadding about town, dressed up all fancy schmancy, and they look like one of those dollies that you'd buy at Bartholomew Fair. This is not. You won't end up on a list. I promise you. You could Google that.
If I googled it, will end up on a list. Is it a sex toy?
The definition in cant, a gentleman's guide. Cant
you can't say that without it sounding naughty.
I know, that's why I love it so much. Is a person dressed up in a tawdry manner, like the dolls or babies sold at Bartholomew Fair. To be clear, they aren't talking about human babies. Dollies were called babies. And when it's my turn again, you might get another term from cant, a gentleman's guide.
There were some people legit using the C word in the comments on Insta, and I can't remember who it was now. We put emphasis on dictionary.
I feel that way.
So there we go. How to use the C word without actually using the C word.
Brilliant.
You are not wrong. I do have a mouth like a scaffolder. You're completely correct.
There's loads of hearts coming up the screen on Instagram.
Bloody love me for it. No, you do.
Can I just say, if one of the advantages of YouTube, obviously, if you're on Instagram, you can only see the comments at the time. So if you watch us on Insta, but you can go up to YouTube later, the comments stay.
Yes.
And, comedy. Because I'm telling you what, if you haven't seen this, there's some shit going on here. There is.
Right,
George II then, son, as Philippa mentioned.
I
think of the three, the least, to be fair.
You're candidate. You're candidate.
Have you got Stockholm syndrome? Have you started sympathising with the enemy?
You've been spending a lot of time with George, haven't you?
I have.
Dirty bitch.
He's not my history crush.
Who is?
Jasper Tudor.
George the Cant.
George can't.
I noted the comments only on the desktop. I haven't seen the chat home on the playback when I'm on the mobile. Oh, I've not checked on the mobile. Anyway, George II was born on the 10th of November, 1683 in Schloss Hellenhausen in Hanover. I probably pronounced that wrong.
Bless you.
The old ones are the best. He became king of Great Britain and Ireland, Duke of Brunswick, and somewhere else, and a Prince Elector of the Holy Roman Empire. Now, he's brought up in northern Germany, and he was the most recent British monarch to be born outside of the UK, which I thought was quite interesting. A little bit of a tidbit of knowledge there. He had a sister, Sophia Dorothea, 3 years younger, still one of my favourite names ever. Now, until he was 4, he spoke only French, which was really the language used around court and the language of diplomacy. But there obviously gets to a point when you're going to be a well-educated, royal young man where you have to start being tutored in different things. So he studied English, German, Italian, and then also genealogy, which made me think after our discussion the other day that he'd be able to find out who his 13 times great grandmother is.
Anne Boleyn, we know it. We already know it.
She said with the first. She said with the first.
Was that last week or the week before we took the piss out of people doing their own genealogy? Anyway, if you missed it, go back. It was well worthwhile, and you might learn something.
We'll repeat it. You know, we'll probably
Forever.
repeat
Come up
it
again.
Forever.
Trust and believe it'll come up again.
And again and again and again. He also studied military history and battle tactics. And actually, for all else he may or may not have been, at the time, being a good military man, a strong military man, was something that was exceptionally important. He was naturalised as an English subject. It was something I didn't know, via the Sophia Naturalisation Act in 1705, which I'd never heard of before, but now I have, and so have you. In 1706, he was made the Knight of the Garter and created Duke and Marquess of Cambridge, Earl of Milford Haven, Viscount Northallerton, and Baron Tewkesbury. There's a test on this at the end. Now, this is one of the things that I made me laugh because it's a bit silly. This is where I can't look at Kat. So initially, he had marriage negotiation with Hedvig Sophia of Sweden. Sweden. Sorry, that was a little bit Muppets, wasn't it? Sweden. Oh no. Okay, that was not intentional.
Casually racist. We're going after the sauna.
We've killed Catherine. She's deceased. We've done it.
Gone. I can't get it out of my head now.
The marker is Beaver Week. If I makes it wish if we could still speak, because I actually literally couldn't breathe then. Anyway,
Beaver Week.
So as much of a bellend as his father was, he went, my marriage was shit. I want you to have a marriage that's based on sort of love, and that's lovely, especially for that period. So the initial one with the Swedish lady didn't work out. I'm so sorry.
Is Jeff afraid he can't reminding us of the chef from Muppets?
That's the thing. That is it, exactly. So in June, this is about to get worse. In June 17th.
I don't even know where you're going, so I can't help.
I don't either. But I can't rescue this. But the Muttley laugh is out because she's done. We've broken her.
It's done. Gone.
Okay. Start
Get
crying.
your shit together.
Did he love his wife then, Catherine?
He did. He in 1705, in June, which is obviously very important, he went to, I might have to do a slightly different way around to give myself a moment. He went to meet Caroline of Ansbach, who you may know, it did eventually turn out to be his wife, and he really, really quite loved her. And she was the former ward of his Aunt Sophia Charlotte of Prussia. And around late August of that year, I believe they married, or that they sort of got betrothed, and she came to Hanover. The bit that made me laugh was that he decided to go in disguise to meet her. And this is so childish, but it's Kat's fault, because if I was just saying this to other people, I probably wouldn't say anything. But he went as somebody called Monsieur de Bush. It's not even that funny. Monsieur de Bush. Right.
I don't know.
I need to think about something sad to calm myself down now, like my bank balance or something. Okay. So he meets her and they love each other and it's fabulous. It is. And now, I went back to him being a military man. He wanted to participate in the war against Flanders, but his dad said, no, you at this point do not have a son and heir, so we need to protect you. Lo and behold, son and heir. Thank you, Caroline. Well done. And Frederick, the delightful Frederick, as Philippa has referenced. Now, this is quite cute. It's not, because they both nearly died. But in July 1707, she got smallpox, and he was just distraught. Is he a rose bush? And he sat by her bedside. So normally, when you've got, you've got the monocle, the heir apparent, that you have to protect them, don't you, at all costs? But he said no, and he sat by her to her bedside, and then he got smallpox. Anyway, they both survived.
It's really fucking contagious.
Yeah, it's really good.
They both survived, but it was a bit itchy bum time. But they both survived.
You got pox up your arsehole, so yeah, it's pretty
nasty.
itchy.
Oh, come on now. It was between 1705 and 1713. They had 3 more children, all girls, and Amelia and Caroline, and Amelia and Caroline. So when his father became king, it was surprise. And in September 1714, him and his father sailed to Greenwich for his father to take the throne. And he became Prince of Wales, as you do when you're the heir apparent. And Caroline came over a few weeks later, and she brought the girls with her, but they left Frederick behind to be raised by his tutors. This comes back to bite him on the arse later on, as you will see.
His pocky arse. His pock-marked arse.
In July 1716, so George returned to Hanover for 6 months, but rather than kind of giving him a regency role, he gave him guardian of the realm, which gave him, it was a really sort of Tesco value regency. Yes, which gave him a little bit of power to govern what was going. If you're not English, then that means the sum total of fuck all, value, do you? Yeah,
a Walmart own brand,
a Walmart bargain line. I don't know.
Price promise.
I need to get my shit together here. Okay. But he went on a royal progress.
From Wish. Yes, that's it. It's the Wish version of the Regency. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the
great photos.
But it's bullshit.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, he took this opportunity. He went on a royal progress. He allowed people to come and watch him eat at Hampton Court Palace. And then there was at the Drury Lane, the theatre there was an attempt on his life. And bizarrely, all these things actually made him quite popular with the people. His dad wasn't very popular. So this is a real boon for him sort of at this point. And this kind of sort of added to the deterioration in their relationship, really. Now, in 1717, they had another son, little George William. Now, you think, oh, you've got an heir and a spare. However, and Philippa mentioned this briefly before, at the christening, there is a big to-do. There is, because the king, now apparently this was a custom to invite the Lord Chamberlain and Duke of Newcastle to be one of the baptismal sponsors, but George didn't like him. He didn't want him there, and there was a row, and somehow this guy took it to be that he'd been challenged to a duel. No one quite knows how that happened, but it all went a bit pear-shaped. There was a big argument about it, and George I said, right, you, out. Kicked him out of James's palace with his missus, sort of basically confined them to their rooms, but he kept their children. What a cock.
Mm.
So a huge cock. And
Huge
so
cock.
for a while they weren't allowed access to them at all. They did sneak in once. Then after a while they were allowed to go in once a week. And then she was kind of given unfettered access to her own children. How generous. But very, very sadly, in February 1718, little George William died and his father was there with him. So that's obviously really sad. Now, when he became king, the 11th of June, 1727, he was actually quite popular. A lot of people were like, oh, hooray, the other one's dead. No real loss. So you come in, yeah. But then it was around at that sort of point that people were going to say, actually, you're a bit like your dad. Shit. Disappointing. Oh, when are you your king from Wish? You think it's going to be very good. His coronation, he made a bit of a twat of himself. He was too hot. His crown slid down. He just looked an absolute mess. And all the things that had made him popular were now making him unpopular. Now, his term, this is really, really interesting. If you have any interest really in neurodivergence, which obviously wasn't something that was a thing at the time, he was said to have had this quite turbulent and distressing upbringing. You know, he saw what happened to his mother. He was brought across, you know, all these types of things from the continent, which he didn't necessarily want to do. But he was very obsessed with facts and figures, numbers, genealogy, military history, and all these types of things. And he would just repeat these things over and over and over. It was like having the same conversations.
An info dump.
An info, yeah, exactly.
An info dump, and he had special interests.
Yeah, so that we're looking a little bit ASD here, aren't we? A little bit of autism spectrum disorder. But he would do things like, everything had a very firm routine. And I liked his attendants had to number his underwear with days of the week. And then I thought, my youngest has got minion pants with days of the week on. So is that really that unreasonable?
No,
I don't think it was.
No.
Anyway, he had a mistress called Henrietta Howard. And they said apparently his wife was happy to send him to her because she was so boring that it meant she got the evening off. But he was military going to see her. It's the same thing again, 7 o'clock every night. And if it wasn't 7 o'clock, he wouldn't go in. He would just pace with his watch, waiting until the time was to go in. And he only really had a mistress because he loved his wife so much, because it was the dumb thing for English kings to have mistresses. And their relationship lasted almost...
his clothes beforehand, didn't he?
It's including his pants.
I bet he folded in his socks.
I hope he took socks off. That's awful when people don't take their socks off.
I bet he folded his clothes first.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's face says it all, really. If people would put a picture of their face in the comments, it would look like that. Anyway, their relationship lasted almost 20 years, which is a bloody long time for that sort of scenario. But people really think that one of the reasons why it was so successful is that she was practically deaf. So, if you're going to be the mistress of the most boring man at court, then that probably helps, really, doesn't it? Anyway, people started to get annoyed with him because he was getting very large grants and subsidies to basically finance himself, and there was heavy taxation. So if you know anything about the history of the monarchy, you know that taxation has caused so many rows previously, mostly for quite obvious reasons. So he was starting to get unpopular, and all these little rhymes went round about him. So this one was, "You may strut, dapper George, but 'twill all be in vain. We know Queen Caroline, not you, doth reign." So there's a little bit of truth in this. So while she was Princess of Wales, Caroline developed a relationship with Robert Walpole, who was basically the de facto prime minister. And they would come up with what they wanted Walpole to do, what his ideas were, and they would sort of subtly manipulate him basically into doing all these things. And he didn't realize that. He really thought that he was like, you know, really rolling this stuff out. He was really in control of everything was happening, but everybody except him could basically see that that was bullshit. So his relationship with his son, we come back to the eldest son thing again, just deteriorated further and further. Now this is lovely, this is heartwarming. He called his son a monster and the greatest villain ever born, the greatest ass and the greatest liar, and the greatest beast in the whole world, adding, "I heartily wish he was out of it." So that's nice. Frederick, very bitter at being left behind when his father and his grandfather came over, and he didn't come for quite a long time afterwards. So here history repeats itself. He's now, Frederick's the affable, lovely, cool one that everyone likes, and his dad's a king and he's a bit of a cock. So here we are again. And he became a bit of opposition for the king and for Walpole. And as Philippa said, George kicked him out of St James's. This is exactly the same thing, but he's set up across the road at Leicester House, almost like a separate court, really. Now, in November of 1736, Caroline collapses and dies. It's probably complications from issues he'd had in her 8 billion pregnancies. He sits with her, keeps a constant vigil, and he's very upset. He's deeply, deeply upset and traumatized when she dies. People do actually comment on this for quite some period about how distressing it was seeing him like this. But even though she was gone, he still kept his faith in Walpole all the time. Now, this is a big thing. As Philippa said, we can't talk about everything, but around 1746, we basically see the end of all the conflicts with the Jacobites. They kind of get their last-ditch attempts at Culloden, and it's fairly certain at this point that they have to accept that we now have the Hanoverian dynasty, and that's it, and they've had their last hurrah. And, you know, there is some really good sort of warfare and strategy and things under him as king. And actually, this instilled great. This is a great fact. Instilled great patriotism. That. And in the first time ever, on the 28th of September at Drury Lane in 1745, God save the King. So we had lots of this very sort of arousing things going on around this time. Anyway, normally. The death of the Prince of Wales would be considered extremely traumatic, quite unsettling and unstabilising. But Frederick dies, no one cares. It's a summary of what happened at that time. Apparently, he was hit by a cricket ball and had a pulmonary embolism. Wasn't that in when we did Stupid Deaths? I've got a feeling that it should have been, even if it wasn't. He died at Leicester House, aged only 44, and he was the last Prince of Wales not to succeed to the throne. And his son George, at the age of 12, became heir apparent. He died on the 25th of October, 1760, 6 a.m, of course, in his routine. He got up at Kensington Palace, called for his hot chocolate and went to the water closet. You know when it's not funny? Waiting outside, his valet heard a noise louder than the royal wind, and then a thud. That was the end of George II. Just as a summary, though, of the good things of his reign, in the later years, there were signs of economic and social progress with new levels of production in coal, shipbuilding and agriculture. Most countries' foreign policy was motivated by territorial gains, so war, basically. But our overseas actions were designed to build a trade network worldwide. He was forgotten very quickly, within about 15 minutes or something. And he wasn't always very popular, but he did extinguish the Jacobite threat. Had long ministries of people like Walpole, which created huge amounts of stability, put the foundations of the Industrial Revolution in place, expanded overseas territories, bringing prosperity to the nation, and saw a rapid rise in population, had a number of notable military successes, bringing Britain close to becoming a world superpower. So that is George II and his quite nice marriage and his son and his wife and stuff.
Excellent. Just as before we get on to Cat with George IV, because this is a little interesting. Someone saying about Jacobite and how does it relate to James? Jacob. It's basically the Latin version of James. That's why. So you'll see Jacob up in Scotland. That's what you see, referring to James VI of Scotland. If you go to Edinburgh, I think it is.
Did you see what Ravens put? What was that noise? My clothes. Really? It sounded heavy. I was wearing them at the time.
Next week there will be another intermission in this point. We're talking now or after?
Yeah, let's talk about now. We need people's help with this one. Well, in fact, we're relying on you for this one.
So we're going. The segment that is going to come in here from next week is the past problems post bag. So we would like you to send in your agony aunt based queries, make them historical, but we're going to, or not, but we are going to answer as we think a historical figure would answer. And we're going to pick and choose which ones we want to answer as, and you're going to get the answers that we think.
Don't be sensible.
Don't be sensible.
Don't be sensible.
Be let your imaginations run wild. We're looking forward to what you come up with.
And we would like you to email those past problems to our past problems post bag, which is actually our email address, our Gmail account. So and if you can flag up what it is by in the subject line doing PPP for past problems post bag, that would be delightful. But you know what? A question here. Era clear. Can we write to anyone specific? Do you know what? If you fancy, if you're like, I would like to know what's one. Direct, and as a historical interpreter, I can always give it a go and see how they might have answered.
Where is the email address? Is it like in the link tree or anything?
Okay. It is. No, it's not actually. I am about to put it in the YouTube comments, and if you give me a sec, I will also put it in the Instagram comments. But it's basically History After Dark 2021 because some git bag had already taken History After Dark.
There might be a given, maybe not deceased.
So
we didn't know when we could have it.
By way of an example of what you might do, it might be something along the lines of my neighbour's hedge is encroaching on my land. What can I do? Or you might be like, I'm trying to sell my daughter into marriage and she won't go. So as varied as that, you could give us a historical problem. You know, I've got these two nephews, they're in the way of me becoming king. What should I do? Or you could be like, my neighbour keeps parking on my driveway. How should I respond?
Stop the Richard thing.
If you don't want Richard slander, go somewhere else. That's what I'm going to say to you. We're only about Richard slander. Only about it. The email address is historyafterdark2021. No dots, no dashes, no underscores. historyafterdark2021, all one word, at gmail.com. There we go.
Imagine this. For Pete's sake, you three, could you pick a harder subject for an overthinker, overanalyzer, over everything, stressing over it and indecisive already?
Send them all in.
You can send more than one.
Yeah.
We don't need to filter. We'll pick. We're going to do one.
And we're going to do it every week. So,
yeah. Right. Let me jump in because I'm running out of battery and also time. I'm going to go quick. I'm going to go rapid because I'm talking about George IV, and he is a philandering, womanizer, spendthrift, wastrel braggart. He claims military victories as his own when they are not his own, and he's just a marauding shitbag. He is born at St James's Palace on the 12th of August, 1762. He is the eldest son of King George III and Queen Charlotte. Father and son would, as is the Hanoverian custom, fall out with each other a lot. Part of the reason why is that George III, he's known as, one of his nicknames is Farmer George, because he sort of likes the more simple things in life, she says, with him living in a palace. But compared to his son's behaviour, George is roving around the country, libido on full display. He is such a shagger. There are rumours of affairs with a wife of one of the grooms, one of his mother's maids of honour, a courtesan, and more than one actress. We've got no idea how many illegitimate children he is responsible for. He is also financially profligate. He's paying off mistresses. He's spending money on fashionable clothing, food, and alcohol. He's a gambler. His stables, and in fact, if you're at the Brighton Pavilion, if you ever go to the Brighton Pavilion, the theatre venue, there's a large circular, well-lit theatre venue. That was his stables. His horses slept better than his servants. His George IV's stables at the time cost him £31,000 a year. He runs up extraordinary bills remodeling Carlton House, filling its interior. Carlton House has been given to him at 21. It's part of a package that includes an income of £50,000 a year. That was my battery warning. The Duchy of Cornwall's revenues, which amounts to a further £12,000 a year, plus a capital sum of £60,000 a year. So all in all, that is £122,000 a year. So I did a currency conversion. in 2017 money, we are talking £10,504,749 yearly. Still, nevertheless, he manages to run up torrents of debts, and that ends him up in a sticky situation. When he is in his early 20s, he meets a woman called Mrs. Maria Fitzherbert. She is a twice widowed Roman Catholic, aged 28. She's 6 years older than George. At first, he seems to make her his mistress, but she doesn't want that. She's not up for it. And so then he's like, marry me, which is unspeakably stupid. The Act of Settlement of 1701 made it illegal, and then the Act of Union of 1707 was not only making it illegal for a Roman Catholic to inherit the throne, but also for them to marry a Roman Catholic. Also, if he had married her, he is in breach of the Royal Marriages Act also. So it's a no bueno. Maria also clearly recognised that it was bloody stupid. So she declines it and, in fact, makes plans to leave the country. George, prince among men that he is, on the 8th of July, 1784, stabs himself. Fucking stabs himself. And then sends his surgeon and a trio of his mates to go to Maria Fitzherbert to tell her what he's done. And then to also say that if she doesn't come to him, he will tear open his bandages and reopen the wound.
Off you go.
Now I'm just going to point. I'm going to point out there. I know that many of us, I think we're all adults here, but just in case some people are younger than me and they don't know, this is not romance. This is abuse. Anybody who does this to make you comply is run literally as far away as you can. It is utterly fucking unacceptable to do this to a person. Anyway, she goes to the prince, agrees to marry him. He gets a ring on her finger. As soon as this happens, she gets away from him and then repudiates the engagement. Then she fucks off to the continent. He is bombarding her with letters, threatening to come and get her. He's like, you've got to come back eventually. She gives in and goes home. And marries him. This marriage is not publicly acknowledged, but there's loads of rumour and scandal all around. Then in 1788, George III experiences some form of mental collapse. And then we have this question over what suddenly George IV, as he's going to become, has a lot more potential power, and there's going to be a lot more scrutiny over what he could do. Also to point out that George wasn't faithful to Maria Fitzherbert, still shagging around, despite the fact that she was his wife. George recognises that if he wants to be regent, his marriage to Maria Fitzherbert is a no bueno. So he ends up abandoning her in the 1590s, and then he's having another affair, or many more affairs, and his debts are still mounting up. So because the debts are so mounted up, they basically say you have to make a marriage. You have to just marry someone. And the person selected for this, frankly, bigamous marriage is a cousin.
Of course it is.
Who else?
Caroline of Brunswick. Caroline of Brunswick is not a great option. Like, George is a vile shitbag, but she is also a drinky, outspoken-y, she has the manners of a fucking pig in a sty. She's not a great option either. When they first meet, George has to fortify himself with a shitload of booze. At the wedding, he is so pissed he can barely stand. They're not unable to consummate the marriage because he passes out in the bridal suite because he's absolutely
wasn't he like
fucking
crying at the altar or something? Because he
crying and shaking. I think he was like wine drunk and having like a lady around her handbag. He's having a little bit of a weepy wine drunk time. They clearly do manage to consummate it in the morning. And it may have been the only time those two ever did the nasty, because their only child was born pretty much 9 months, 40 weeks after their wedding. Their child is the Princess Charlotte, who goes on to become the great hope of the nation. until her very untimely death in childbirth, at which point there is this period of national mourning. It's often equated with the mourning that surrounded the death of Princess Diana. National monuments are a national monument is funded and paid for by the people. The shops run out of black cloth because of the death of this child, but the relationship between Charlotte's parents just completely falls apart. They end up separating in 1797. So Charlotte at this point is less than a year old. And the fighting going back and forth, essentially the only thing that keeps Caroline in any form of position is the fact, probably, that George III and his wife, Charlotte, utterly hate their son. So they take her side, even though she's kind of a bit of a problem. Poor little Princess Charlotte becomes in the middle of this, toing and froing. And George weaponizes things against her and kind of puts her through torments, about whether he's going to just marry her off. He takes her from her mother, hides her away. It's a bad time for the child, and this gets really bad when in 1810 George III enters his final period of mental instability, and then George IV is sworn in as Prince Regent in 1811. And at this point, Caroline can't come to court. Her access to her daughter is restricted. She can barely get there. And the way that Charlotte responds to it, there's a quote. She says, "My mother was wicked, but she would not have turned so wicked had not my father been much more wicked still." At his coronation, he, and bearing in mind she is his wife, Caroline is still abroad when his wife goes abroad. Basically, it's so miserable to try and get things out of the way. She leaves, so she's abroad when her daughter Princess Charlotte dies from complications from childbirth. She comes back though because her husband is ascended to the throne, because George III dies in 1820. So she comes back because she should be crowned and recognised as Queen of England. But George IV is like, absolutely fucking not. You can fuck off to the far side and then fuck off further. And he even sent men to bribe her to stay away, but she was like, nope. There's a shiny hat with my fucking name on it, bitches. So when she turns up,
fucking not leaving that bastard.
When she turns up, actually her arrival is met with public rejoicing. And people are quite concerned that her presence is going to cause unrest. But there is, by the time it comes to the actual coronation, when she turns up and starts banging on the doors of the abbey, demands to be let in, public feeling has gone the other way, and they're much more on their new king's side for whatever reason, and so she kind of goes away having been booed a little bit.
I think she humiliates us a bit there, doesn't she? And that didn't go down well with the public.
Yeah, so the crowds were kind of jeering at her, and finally she was prepared to take the money and leave. She gets £50,000 a year to live abroad. Unfortunately, she never really gets to enjoy it, because just weeks after the coronation, she dies. She was 53.
That was stupid.
Her body goes. Yeah, I mean, should have done that. She's taken back to Brunswick and she's interred in the ducal vault there. George IV never remarries, but he does keep company with mistresses, and the pavilion in Brighton is basically it was again a rival court to his father's, but also it then becomes the dirty weekend in Brighton. George originates it, and he does all sorts of dirty bastard things in that pavilion. I wouldn't take your shoes off on the carpet because they might be sticky. He dies at Windsor in 1830, aged 67, and he is laid to rest in St George's Chapel. I think it's probably for the best that he and his wife were different sides of the continental divide for their respective burials. And of course, because they'd only had the one child, in the aftermath, we get this rabid breeding frenzy, which results in the production of Victoria. One of George IV's younger brother, the Duke of Kent, is Victoria's father. George is succeeded by his surviving brother William, who has no surviving children of his own. And then after William, we get Victoria, and then shenanigans continue. I think for me, I haven't touched on how George responded to Napoleon, but he kind of became semi-obsessed with Napoleon, and particularly semi-obsessed with the notion that he in some way had contributed to defeating Napoleon, even though that was straight bullshit. So for me, he is just a vainglorious, heartless wastrel who ate himself into ill health, who just couldn't say no to anything, to lust, to greed. Like he is the 7 deadly sins: wrath, pride, all of those sorts of things. And there are precious few redeeming qualities about George IV, except for the fact he built a bloody nice house in Brighton. But it is still fucking weird.
Yeah,
lent his name to Regent Street.
Yes,
our
which
first
of course,
shopping mall.
Indeed, and part of that is because he wanted and the reason why some of the streets in London don't make any sense is because it was all supposed to go to one place, and he was like, "Oh no, fuck it, I want it. I'm now going to live at this one, so that now the road has to come here." And the architect was like, "What the fuck?" So he changed his mind and was just generally an arsehole. That's me. I hate him.
Yeah, he was an arsehole with other people's money. That's the whole thing, wasn't it? There was
ever.
No humility. There's just no humility. He didn't have any respect for where this money is coming from, and the satire of George IV is so incredible because it's so spot on with cartoons of him overindulging and the window showing people starving in the background, and he just seemed oblivious to what his role was supposed to be.
Intrepid Fraidy Cat points out that we should have covered Lord Byron and Beau Brummell. Yes, I mean that's the thing is his utterly fucking fragile ego. Like Beau Brummell, George desperately wants to be cool like Beau Brummell. He wants to have his paintings done like Beau Brummell. He wants to have like very flattering lights and neckerchiefs, etc. But Beau Brummell is syphilitic and and it spreads to his brain, and he starts essentially he calls George fat. And this person, and George has just such mediocre self-esteem that he's like, nah, I can't deal with it. And he just goes off. And Beau Brummell is ruined. This man who has been his hero, who was really sick. I mean, Beau Brummell's also a bit of a knob, and so is Byron. They're a collection of knobs. They're all knobbing to each other.
It's like B&Q.
Everyone's a bell end in this. No one is
no one is covered in glory.
No, apart from Princess Charlotte. Like,
apart from Princess Charlotte,
Caroline of Brunswick is also an irredeemable tosser too. They're all fuck them. Fuck them all.
Yeah,
the Georges. So
someone say, and the theme in the comments seems to be that George IV was the gittiest of the gits. That seems to be the theme.
Just so
in the comments.
fucking spoiled. Just such a spoiled wanker.
Yes, that is it.
Yeah.
Can I make mention while we're finishing up that actually we've talked about 2 people who are the subject of talks during the Georgian Online History Festival, which we've got coming up, because Catherine, you mentioned Henrietta Howard, George II's mistress. Tracy Borman, actually her first ever book was on Henrietta Howard, and her talk at the Georgian Online History Festival is going to be on Henrietta Howard. And also we have a talk about Princess Charlotte, who I think we've all got a bit of a soft spot for. Anne Stott is doing, who's written a book about Princess Charlotte, and she has a talk on her again for the festival as well, as part of that festival. So if people want to know more about those people, then you could come along to the festival, which Kat is also doing a talk on the bare knucklers, bare knuckle boxing.
Yes. Bare knuckle, the pugilists of Georgian times.
Yeah.
Pew, pew.
Yeah. So
fistic battles, they called them.
Called them what?
Fistic battles.
There you go. Yeah.
Don't you get fistic with me?
Fisting battles would be a different thing.
Fistic.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's a very different thing that Philippa just mentioned.
Don't Google that.
Don't Google it.
You can go to Eventbrite and search Georgian Online History Festival, so you can get your tickets. You can do that, but don't Google what I just said.
No. If you follow me at Historical Collaborator on here, the link is in my bio.
Oh, thank you, darling.
So there you
50
go.
shows
So now you
to
have
cut.
no excuses.
Yeah.
No excuses.
No excuses. Right. So do we seem to think of the
you've started this year. You started off with interesting phrase.
Sexual history after dark. Oh,
Yeah.
actually, right. So I've got two things. Somebody who wishes to remain anonymous sent me this regarding this evening's discussion and regarding, because G and alliteration, so Gittish Georges. And the Georgians were a group of greedy, gluttonous, gormy gits, generally grim with each other, grim with each other. Shall I start that again? Because I fucked that right up.
You can try.
A group of greedy, gluttonous, gormy gits, generally grim, with each generation getting gradually grosser and gloomier.
I
love it. Very good.
Pretty fair summary, I thought.
My battery is.
Okay,
Yeah,
so are we going with George IV?
I think George IV is the gittiest git.
I think, okay, so he'll go on the wheel of gits.
And also, culpability question incoming for George shortly.
Right.
Yeah, on the Substack, right?
Yay.
Yeah, so it'll be a poll on the Substack. So make sure you are signed up to our Substack because it's free, and you may as well, because that is where we're sticking everything. And I can't remember the I can. Shall I, while I'm just finding that, tell you next week?
Yes, what's happening?
What we're doing. So
it's a big one next week.
Next week is, so we're doing it in 4. So next week is our 4th of this round before we have a kind of round up and do all the scoring thing. Next week you're going to not want to miss, because it's Henry VIII. And if you want to know what I have titled him on our spreadsheet, you're going to have to be a close friend, because I'll let you know on our close friends bit in a bit. But it doesn't just say Henry VIII.
Raven says, didn't see a poll for the 40 elephants.
Yeah, probably because I forgot to put one in.
It'll be there.
No, I didn't. Sorry, I did put it in and it corrupted, so I need to redo it. Maybe I can do 2 in 1 this week. I will try. Yes, thank you for the reminder though, because I had forgotten. Our Substack is History After Dark Hub, as in HUB, as in the hub. So History After Dark Hub.substack.com.
Remember, that's where we stick everything. Mind you, that's what she said.
It's happening, Philippa. It's happening. We are dragging you down to our level. Soon enough, it's going to be liability 1, liability 2, and liability 3. And there will be no hand on the tiller. We will be a rudderless ship.
We have also made some progress with our merch as well, so we'll let you know what's happening with that. I need to do some stuff on that over the weekend. So
yeah,
we may or may not be including the word "cat" onto the.
Oh dear. So we've talked about Substack. We've talked about next week. We've talked about Buy Me a Coffee.
buymeacoffee.com/had podcast. Thank you to you very generous people who have bought us coffees. But that's also where you can join our close friends if you want to know what stupid things we talk about.
You get some extra content on Instagram for that. So we better wrap this up now because of Kat's battery. So if you only follow us on Instagram, please go down to YouTube. As we said, you get all the comments from the live stored there. So they're always worth having a look at. It is History After Dark. If you only follow us on YouTube, please go down to Instagram, where it's history.after.dark. And you do get little bits of extra content in there. You sometimes get some screenshots, and you can be a close friend, which, as Philippa said, you can find through our buy me a coffee. So yeah, we just send you some extra random shit sometimes. That probably means we need some more therapy than you already realize that we need. So there we go. Yes, so if you like the angry shouty ones, next week's going to be a good one.
Oh yeah.
Oh hell
yeah.
Yes.
And somehow, yes.
So apparently someone's birthday. Carol, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
A fun gift. Happy birthday. Thank you so much for joining us on your birthday. And thank you all so much for joining us. Full stop. I apologize for my just lack of ability to function as a person in the middle there. As usual, get in touch. We probably won't reply, but we mean well. And Kat, are you gonna? It's true though, isn't it? Sometimes
we're not going to lie. We're not going to raise your hopes. Reply to your
past problems post bag though.
Yeah.
Yes,
past
we will.
Problems post bag. We're looking for that.
Don't forget. Right, Kat, you're going to count us out.
We're going to go in 3, in 2, in 1.
Bye.